Country and Western music is a form of music developed from the old-time music from the 1920s, combined with the love-struck gunslinging music style called Western from the 1930s through 1960. It developed in the southeastern states of the U.S. as a mix of folk music from the British Isles, church music, and African American blues. This early type of music was considered to be working class music, where most of the entertainers were only musicians part-time, as they also held down jobs as miners, farmers, and so on. Old-time music was first recorded in the 1920s, with recordings by the first family of the genre, the Carter family. Another early star of this time was Jimmie Rodgers, who was taught how to play guitar, sing blues, and work chants by African Americans in railroad gangs in which he worked. He combined old-time music and folk songs in his own style of music, utilizing a vocal technique called yodeling. Yodely, yodely, lay yee-hoo. Yodely, 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 lay yee-hoo. In the 1980s, it began to be noted that country western music was making a shift to a suburban sound, reflecting a new demographic of the South. Country music today, overall, remains a style that is resistant to definition, with Nashville still being the commercial hub for country music. It's still seen today that people from working class backgrounds travel there looking for their chance to break into the business. Herein begins our look into the life of a man who has traveled this country journey. Robbie Fulks. There are not many artists who still make music in the country genre that directly relates to the sound from these eras. A man who can still write and perform in a way that honors these originators is Mr. Robbie Fulks.
I'm Robbie Fulks, and I was born in York, PA, Pennsylvania, and I was raised in Virginia, North Carolina, and I've been living here in Chicago since 1983. Well, I started to play instruments when I was pretty young. I was about 7, and I started playing the banjo, and then I started playing the guitar at 11, and the fiddle and a couple other things shortly after that. And in my family, we all played, and sometimes we played together, but just to play music was kind of a given in my family. And, because we were in Virginia, North Carolina, these places, somehow the country influence got in, so, we were playing these, I don't know, I didn't really play the hillbilly style, but the instrumentation kind of veered that way a little bit, bluegrass and folk and hillbilly music. So eventually I just went to the guitar, and that's mostly what I do now.
Robbie obviously grew up with a large country influence, although he does have an ear for many styles of music.
Oh, well, the people that I loved listening to, there at the Bluegrass Festival, you go and you spend all day. You can spend all weekend, 3-day weekend sometimes with your lawn chair and set up a tent and stuff. So we did a little bit of that. And so, we'd see a lot of the same acts over and over again. And some of those acts included people like Doc Watson and John Hartford and Newgrass Revival and Osborne Brothers and Jim and Jesse. And anyway, those were the prominent people in bluegrass music in the 70s. And apart from that, I was also into a broad array of, when you're a teenager and you just soak up influences. So my first date at a concert was Herbie Mann, who played the flute, wore nothing on his chest and danced around with a hairy chest and a flute. It was like hippie jazz flute music. And Leon Redbone was another early concert. But the guys that really got to me were those bluegrass guys, and then rock songwriters like John Lennon and Paul McCartney, Bob Dylan, obvious big names at the time like that. I moved to Chicago in 1983, and I had a girlfriend that lived here, and we moved in with her parents and sort of set up house here and had a child here, and ever since I've been just sort of rooted here. And that's what brought me to Chicago. Yeah, I worked in Nashville for a couple of years on Music Row as a songwriter for a publisher / management company, and so I sort of got some of the nuts and bolts of the business end of writing with other people and of networking and of demoing and all that kind of thing from a more commercial angle, stuff that I didn't know at that point in the early 90s, since I had just been a performer in clubs and stuff until then. So that was a good experience for me, and Nashville's a great place to be for country music in particular. It's a little bit more difficult to do from outside, you know, for the reasons that the whole community and all the networking is there in a very small area.
With Nashville being such a mecca for country music and other cities falling by the wayside in respect to that certain brand of music, the road to fame that Robbie chose to pursue in Chicago was harder to come by.
You know, I can't say if it had gone faster or better or richer for me if I'd have been in Nashville, maybe yes or no. I mean, the competition is stiffer there, and it's a much smaller pool here in Chicago. The nice thing about Chicago is there's always places to play, so, you know, performing in front of audiences is a real important piece to getting better. And so I was able to get better, maybe faster up here, because you can play in more clubs and play to local appreciative audiences. And beyond that, whatever city you work in, if it's not Nashville, there's a certain outsider angle that you can sort of play a little bit, a card you can play, and help brand yourself. And so there's a label that got started here in Chicago that I started recording for early on, and they branded themselves as an outsider. They call themselves insurgent country. So, you know, there's this idea of this enemy army storming the barricades. And if you're not in Nashville, that can appeal to people and help them latch on to what you do, even though it's I would say mostly bullshit. You know, I mean, your music stands or falls based on the content of the music, but you know, it's a fun little branding thing, I think.
Taking up a residency at local hotspots for music in the city was a move that could be seen as a necessity for Robbie, while it also is a way for him to let his creativity free without strict boundaries.
Well, I would play probably arenas if I could and make more money, but that's I'm in the smaller clubs partly because of necessity, and that's where my economic bracket is. But that having been said, there is a certain kind of a limited positive angle that you can gain to that. I play at a little room that, you know, 200 people would just be packed shoulder to shoulder, to put it politely, in the Hideout on the near north side where I play. And because there's not a lot of money, and because the club's a little bit out of the way, and because it's a loose environment, I can experiment. So I can bring in people that I've never played with and improvise. I can mash together, you know, jazz with hillbilly music and do different things that just occur to me to do. So there's, in other words, freedom is the short way to put it. I have freedom that a larger act doesn't have.
As a songwriter, Robbie is widely praised for his ability to write with humor on certain tracks and serious heartfelt country ballads on the next track within the same album, a feat that has not come easily throughout his career.
There is a certain difficulty. I think, I mean, I do some comic songs, and it's a double-edged sword, because when you do funny material, it helps you engage immediately with an audience. You know, if they're laughing, you know that they're listening, and if they're laughing, they're paying attention, and they might remember you more. You know, you're engaging with them. And if you're just singing about your life and it's serious, you have no idea how it's connecting with them sometimes. Then the downside to doing funny material is that, you know, the audience goes, oh, he's that funny guy that does the funny material, and so you get stereotyped easily if you do comic material. And I've never really discovered a quick and efficient answer to that, because I love doing comic material, and I think I'm good at it, and as I say, it works. You know, I can feel it clicking when you make people laugh. But on a record, to go from funny music to sad music, they did it in the 40s and 50s and 60s. It's not really done that much anymore, and I think audiences are less accepting of it on a record. It's harder to get away with on a record.
After 12 solo albums on a few different record labels, such as Geffen Records, his own record label, Boondoggle Records, and Yep Rock Records, Robbie has returned to the first and most frequently used label to exercise that freedom in the release of his latest album, Upland Stories.
Well, the focus of my new record, Upland Stories, is a kind of a non-genre. It's kind of a meeting of folk music and bluegrass and country and maybe some other threads too, maybe a little jazz and some other stuff. So it's hard to identify when you listen to most of it, like what kind of music is this? And I think as a result, it kind of forces your attention on the stories and the lyrics, which are really up front. And the instrumentation doesn't call attention to itself, but it's really sophisticated. In my opinion, instrumented. The playing is really smart and sophisticated. But the lyrics up front, and it's stories that are influenced by writers, like non-musical writers, such as James Agee and Flannery O'Connor and Eudore Welty and Chekhov. And you know, I guess just at some point, it's an area of Southern culture that appeals to me, like in that idea of the South. It's not like rednecky and taking pride in its own backwardness. You know, there's a certain aspect of Southern culture that's unfortunate like that. But there's also this really, there's also the South of oral tradition and humor and tragedy and pathos and reflectiveness and literature and music. And that's the part of the South that I love, and that's what I'm trying to get at in this music.
Robbie continues down the heartbreak road with his offerings from his latest album, Upland Stories, on Bloodshot Records. Keep on trucking, Mr. Fulks. You'll have a following all the way into your sunset when you decide to lay your guitar down.
The people in the house next door think I'm tearing up the floor. It's 4:30.